And I had these problems with orders and obeying and all these things. So I ended up then, when I was 19, in West Berlin, a perfect environment for a person that thinks, well, I'm not worth very much. I'm a loser. Our brain is such a vast such a big universe, you know, and there's so many connections and so many subconscious things that are going on, and we're not aware of all these things that happen at the very moment when we compose or when we create. Everything that has been created has so many other sides. It's also my deepest belief, you know, that as an artist, you have no responsibility. We're not killing anybody with our art, you know. You do that, you know, but not us, not the artist. See me. Oh wait, there's this. I understand that. Okay.
Okay, let's start. Marian Gold, what a pleasure, because you have created songs, you have created music, and the way that you've sung those songs, these songs have stayed with me for so many years of my life. It's a real pleasure to meet someone who has created something that has been important in my life. So first of all, thank you for that. I want to start by talking about your very early years in West Germany, as it would have been called then. You were born in 1954 in Herford, which is near Bielefeld. What was it like growing up post-war in Germany?
Oh, it was, well, the West Germany was occupied after the war. Germany was occupied by the Allied forces. And the area where I grew up was actually the territory of the British troops. So my contact to English pop music was because of that was quite intense. We had the army radio stations that played all the rock and roll songs and stuff. And I mean, the German radio at that time was just a disaster. You know, they were playing classical music. I'm nothing against classical music. I'm a great fan of Mendelssohn Bartholdy, for instance. I'm the biggest fan of Mendelssohn Bartholdy. But anyway, so we were listened. We got lots of influence from that side musically. That was one thing. The other thing was where my musical influence actually was then also came from the classical side at the same time. So in a way, you know, my way of musical indoctrination was kind of the one of a typical middle-class kid, I'd say, you know. So we were probably more keen than Oasis.
What did your parents listen to then at home?
My father, he was listening to basically German Schlager music from the 40s or 30s, and so we had a big musical cast standing in our living room, and underneath the radio with the big green eye, we had lots of these big heavy records. With containing all this kind of music. So just because I was so fascinating in listening to records, you know, I listened to all this bullshit music over and over again, because I mean, that was the only thing that I could play on this thing, you know, and it was lots of fun actually. After a while, I started really to love the music.
That's a really bad sign, isn't it? That anything that is played so often that you can get to love it.
Yeah, you get behind the scene in a way, you know, and then you see it from a different side. Probably the bad thing about it, you know, or the pop music is basically first impression thing, you know. So you don't look behind the scene, you don't question anything, you know. It's just like it has to work after a few seconds or so, you know. And but when you, for instance, when you're listening to a vinyl record, I mean, my experience is the first the songs that you loved instantly when you listen to the record for the first time, they became really unimportant. You know, when you start listening to the vinyl again and again and again, and those songs that you probably did not like very much in the beginning turned out to be the better ones. You know, so it's an interesting receptional thing how everything works. You know, with the human imagination and reception.
I mean, you were growing up at a time where it wasn't long after the Second World War, and I presume this was like the period of where Germany was rebuilding, and I just wonder whether your parents were at all culturally interested.
Yeah, my father was very much into arts, into paintings. He was a collector of paintings and like little vintage things, you know. But very much into painting, and he collected a lot of artists he liked and also supported them. I come from a family, well, you say from a rich family in a way, you know, and so that the fact that my father collected paintings had also a big impact on me. And for me, music is also a very visual thing. And I started to, for instance, I started to not to paint, but to draw from my early days when I was a little kid. And I was always listening to music, and it worked perfectly together. You know, it's very hard, for instance, to write things while you're listening to music. But painting or drawing and listening to music is a perfect thing. And so later on, when I became a musician myself, it was always these visuals I had in my mind, you know, when I was composing with the other guys, you know, when we were composing, I always had little videos or little stories in my mind, you know.
What did your parents want you to be?
Well, my father expected me to be to get into his company and to work in his company, and then later, when he would retire, you know, I would take his place. And I was the black sheep. I'm the youngest of 5 children from different mothers, and I was the black sheep of the family.
Being the black sheep makes you special, though, doesn't it? Being the black sheep, being the outsider. I mean, I'm the black sheep of my family in a lot of ways, but I mean that's for different reasons. But being the black sheep does make you special, and it creates the outsider in a certain extent. And the outsider has played an enormous role in popular music. So how did that feeling of being the black sheep shape you?
Well, it didn't make me in my own feelings very special. I mean, I did not like it. I mean, you want to be loved by your parents, by your father. You know, you want to have like, you know, getting compliments, you know, for what you're doing. And I was always the loser. I was always the guy who would not fit into any scheme, you know, into any plans, you know, of the family. And it ended that way that I disappeared. And I became, first I went to the army. Well, I was drawn to the army when I was 18. And after that, I got thrown out the army then after 10 months. Normally it was 15 months at that time, you know, but I had some problems with officers and stuff. And so they threw me out.
What sort of problems did you have?
Well, a physical interaction.
You had a fight. You had a big fight.
I slapped one of the officers in the face, you know, because I don't know. I had these problems with orders and obeying and all these things. And so I left the army, and I just took the next train from the little village where I was stationed. You know, I took the next train to Hanover, and from Hanover, the next train went to Warsaw. with a stop in West Berlin. You know, so I ended up then when I was 19 in West Berlin, which was at that time a very, very special place, and it was a perfect environment for a person that thinks, well, I'm not worth very much. I'm a loser, you know. I'm always losing, you know. Nobody understands me, and you know, in West Berlin was full of these people. So suddenly I was not alone anymore, you know. I wasn't the outsider anymore.
Before we get to that sort of new family, as it were, in Berlin and not being the black sheep, just one more question about being the generation after the war generation. I'm also, you know, the son of parents who were in the war, and being when I talked to Wolfgang Fleur, he said to me that being that generation made him a lifelong pacifist. How did being part of the generation, the post-war generation in Germany, affect you politically and in your social thinking?
Well, all I can say is that I'm not a pacifist, and I think it is very important that you, when you are attacked, you know, by some evil forces, you know, maybe Nazis or maybe Putin's troops or whatever, you know, you have the right to defend yourself. And I think sometimes there is no other choice. So that was my opinion from the very first time when I started thinking about those kind of things. It was probably a little bit like a cowboy thing, you know. It was because you know, this Wild West movies, you know, it's exactly like that, and they deal a lot of times in a lot of films deal exactly with that topic. You know, there is these guys, there are these guys. They come from Europe, and they're pacifists, you know, and then comes the evil force, you know, and they have to make a decision. Shall they carry on, you know, with their beliefs, or shall they defend themselves? So that impressed me very much, probably more than when I was a kid, probably more than the actual historical things that happened 10 years before my birth. We in our family we did not talk very much about the war. My father was actually not very much interested in talking about these things. There's only one thing. Parts of my family live in London, and when the war broke out, my father and my uncle, who is English, my uncle is English, they both were drawn to the Air Force, and my aunt was always saying, "Oh God, they're going to kill each other." And when the war was over, my father went into a prisoner of war camp, and it was my uncle who took him, who managed to get him out of this. On I think it was the 15th of June when he managed to get him out, and since then they always met at the 15th of June, one in London and one time in Bielefeld, where my father lived, and finished a bottle of whiskey. So most of the things I heard about the war, actually, I heard from my uncle, not from my father.
So, okay, there's this 19-year-old who's, you know, slapped an officer, left, gone to Hanover, and then gone through the corridor, as it were, at that period, to this little island, in a sense, of Berlin in the middle of East Germany at that time. What were your first impressions when you actually got there and got off that train? Can you remember what you felt about that city?
Well, my first question was, God damn, where am I going to sleep? You know, I had no money. I had nothing. I had no intention to going to my family. I was just like, I just want to disappear. And West Berlin was a great place to disappear completely. It was like you slam in the door behind you, and leaving outside. And there was no other place on the whole planet like West Berlin at that time. And I started a complete new existence in a way. So the first couple of months, you know, I was a homeless person, and I lived with all these homeless people in the park. And yeah, and I think actually the first album we did is a lot about these times, you know, like Summer in Berlin, for instance, you know, and Summer in Berlin is about, West Berlin wasn't a very nice place in a way. It wasn't a very romantic place. It was, in the winter, it was horrible, you know, very gray, very much like Soviet kind of black and white, terrible feeling. And the smell was terrible there from the coal heatings and everything. And in summer it was very different. It was could be very romantic. There could be very romantic moments when you were spending your time in the parks and in the shadow of the wall. There was some romantic feeling about it. And actually, when we wrote Summer in Berlin, I tried to explain in the song. I tried to explain that all these ugly things in West Berlin were, in a way, they could also be, it really depends on the perspective, you know. They could also be very beautiful in a way, in a probably in a perverted way somehow. But it was just the environment where I experienced freedom for the first time in my life. This is so ridiculous, because West Berlin was the result of the opposite.
I mean, I know that that experience in Berlin influenced many tracks on the album. Obviously, you know, Big in Japan. You mentioned Zoo, which I presume is Bahnhof Zoo, and the idea of buying drugs or buying heroin. Obviously, Forever Young is the threat of nuclear annihilation at the time, and living in Berlin, you are, you know, on the border, and this sort of experience. Were you aware at that time that you were going into a musical direction, or were these just experiences that later, when you went to Munster, were these experiences that later you could reflect on?
No, it was not my plan to become a musician. I want to become a painter, and I studied a couple of semesters at the University of Arts in West Berlin, and then I had this friend, Michael, and he was very much interested in music. And not only listening to music, I mean, we were both great fans of music, and we had like, after a while, I had a couple of albums, and we were really into music, but more as consumers. And then one day he came up and he had a little drum machine, and we started to play with it, you know, and we were drumming alongside with the drum machine, and then we thought, well, is there anything else we could do, because nobody could play any instrument. So we bought a little sequencer and a little synthesizer, which we connected with the sequencer and let it run alongside the drum machine. And then we heard from, you know, Brian Eno used like loops from drum fills or so. So we had like this. We also did these drum loops and let them run, and then played alongside with some keyboards, and and it was very primitive. But from the very first moment on, we started to write music. We never started to cover any other's music. So we composed from the very first moment, and that was actually the point, that I would have never expected myself that I was able to compose music, because I thought this is something unbelievable complicated. And then we found that we were able to do that, even if we couldn't play music. I mean, if we couldn't play any instruments or what, we were able because of these little toys that were just invented at that time. I mean, without this machinery, Alphaville would have never existed. Impossible. And then the next thing was I heard the first album of Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, Electricity, and that was just, I thought, wow, they're doing exactly what we're doing, because we felt so alone, you know, because it was the time of punk music, and everybody was playing punk music, and everybody was, you know, the guitar was the thing and keyboards were just bullshit. And so we were, again, I was on the bullshit side. Suddenly, you know, there was this band, OMD, and they did exactly what, I mean, it was just an overwhelming experience when I first heard this record. And that was the biggest encouragement for me. It wasn't Kraftwerk, it was OMD. That really changed my life.
Going back to Berlin, because that's a period in Munster, I think, that you're talking about there, but going back to Berlin was also the era of the Bowie trilogy. It was, and for me, when I was growing up, Bowie represented, it wasn't just his music, he represented the outsider, he represented the alien, he represented the place I wanted to go and to sort of get the fuck out of where I was with my family at that time, and to get into a world where I thought I would be understood. What music did you listen to in that period that represented, in a sense, apart from OMD, which is the music, the actual music you're sort of saying, but what represented the future for you at that period in Berlin?
Well, actually, it was Bowie, but it didn't represent the future. The future was OMD. Bowie represented something. Bowie was a person that I adored. You know, Bowie, I mean, to be like Bowie was so easy. Just put a little bit makeup on and you were beautiful, you know, and it was just like, yeah, it was this outsider thing, but suddenly you know, just because of that, you became attractive to other people, to men, to women, you know, and you could also, you had different personalities, and you could choose between personalities, you could choose between sexes, you had a lot of options, you know, when you were a Bowie fan. And Bowie was like God for me. I mean, and I covered, after I think 20 years later, I covered Bowie song, the first song I ever heard from him. And
which was?
But it was like I don't know. Bowie was. It was a monument. It was not like you. I would have never tried, you know, writing a song that sounded like Bowie or whatever. You know, I could sing like him. I could imitate him. But when I was singing my own songs, I could never sing like him. I mean, there are lots of people, like, for instance, Brian Ferry or David Sylvian, you know, also heroes of mine. That in their timbre there was also a little bit of Bowie. You know, I always, when I was singing our own songs, I was always singing like, my voice sounded like me, not like anybody else. And yeah, I mean, it was a disaster when 2 years or 3 years ago when he died. We were sitting together, and lots of my musical friends, and we were all crying. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I hate to say it's 6 years ago. It's actually 6 years ago. Yeah, 2016.
Fucking hell! This epidemic, you know, it's just a black hole. You know, it's. You always have memorable. You have always to add 2 years. 6 years.
It's great that you mentioned Bowie's androgyny as something that really, you know, sort of influenced and interested you in a way. The other thing, that Bowie's lyrics because he, he sometimes used the cut up technique, they were something that were very open to interpretation. And in essence, your lyrics for your music are also something. Exactly. There we go. Oblique strategies. This is held up. Yeah, and it's the same thing, isn't it? It's the way it's the interpretation is left to the listener in essence. And I think from Alphaville tracks that many people have a different interpretation of what they're about and don't necessarily sort of look right in to see what they're about. So was that something that you gleaned from Bowie? Because I don't think OMD did that so dramatically. It was more the musical side of OMD probably that you were into.
English is not my mother language. So I because it is not like that. When I write lyrics, it's a bit like a patchwork. So this technique of, for instance, of oblique strategies, in putting lines together, I invented it long before because I was an alien to the English language, and my way of constructing lyrics. I mean, the strategy that I used was very much the same from the very beginning. For instance, Forever Young is just a collection of lines from big movies. And I mean, the thought behind it was to make a comment about the political circumstance of the time. But it was a really, I mean, the lyrics are really randomly put together. It was always a quite avant-gardistic thing to write, for me to write lyrics in English, and I straight from the beginning I wrote English lyrics. People always ask me, you're a German band, we also had German songs, and well, and they ask me, why do you write English lyrics? You're a German band, and your German is much better than your English. So, I think my lyrics aren't that bad in my English lyrics. But the thing is, well, we had at the time, before we recorded the first album, we had a couple of German songs and a couple of English songs. The German songs was Blauer Engel, Blue Angel, or another one was Traumtänzer, and another one was I don't know. And then we had the English song, and the English song, and it was Sounds Like a Melody, Big in Japan, Forever Young. So what can we do? We went for the English songs. God damn.
You developed your sort of artistic dreams in Munster with this collective. What was exactly the collective? Because it sounds, when you read the Nelson Collective, it sounds like some sort of big thing, but what was it exactly?
It was just a convention of lost souls, and with a socialistic direction, politically, that was that we would share all the incomes of our future grand glorious project that we were about to do, and so we had a photographer, we had a sculpturist, we had a lot of musicians who couldn't play. And probably also the painter could paint. No, actually, Michael was the painter, and he could paint very well. Actually, he was probably the only one who really could do something professionally. And and then in the end, it was Alphaville who saved the day for the project, and the project carried on up to '95. And I must say that there was never any discussions about we shared all the money, all the income with the whole project, you know, up to that point. And when 95 arrived, then everybody went its own ways and had followed other careers, and it was still we are in good to contact. You know, it was a great time. You know, the Nelson project. And
you were, sorry, you were one of the bands that achieved massive international success, and I just wondered how that success, when you know you explain the past, and the past is very poverty ridden. It's, you know, sleeping on a park bench. It's, you know, the being homeless aspect. It's having no money in Munster, even with this collective, and being, you know, having this sort of social awareness of what the future should be. But then you have this massive success. So how does that massive success change your thinking when it comes?
Not at all. No, it had no significance for us. Absolutely nothing. Yeah, that's all I can say. But you know, it's probably because most of us came from a quite wealthy background. Maybe that is the reason. So this is not it's not a big deal to behave like that. You know, I'm not very proud on that. It's just, it was not what we're interested in. That we weren't interested in money, and we thought, actually, we thought to be very rock and roll because of that. You know, later I understood that, you know, being after money and want to become rich is also a very rock and roll thing. You know, it is also, I mean, so we were not rock and roll at all because we were not interested in money. You know, I think this is very important. You know, it's a very important aspect for rock and roll. For the rock and roll idea is also, you know, to be rich, to be successful, and to have all the girls and all the boys, and, you know, doing, and, you know, so that was what we completely misunderstood the plot. You know, but yeah, we were very successful, and I mean, we carry on till up today. You know, and I can't complain. Actually, it's a great voyage.
The success, with that sort of success comes also the aspect of fame, and fame is something that I think can get in the way of creativity. How did you deal with that aspect of fame, or did you just enjoy it?
We enjoyed it. I mean, it was just, we never thought about writing another album or whatever. And it's actually, I mean, the first album was basically, I mean, most of the parts were written in Münster, in our creative exile, you know, because we had really problems getting a place where we could all live together in West Berlin, which sounds strange today, but it was like that. It was also very difficult to find a place where we could play music. And our drummer, she had a grandmother in Münster, and she had lots of houses, you know, and so we could live in one of those houses in Münster. So we all moved to Münster, and after 1 week, everybody became quite homesick, you know, for West Berlin. And the first album is also the result of this homesickness. I mean, most of the songs are about, I mean, they're homesick songs, you know, about Jet Set, for instance, is about the time when we lived in those, I say, occupied houses, like
squatters, yeah, as squatters, yeah, right. When you squat somewhere.
Right. And some in Berlin, you know, big in Japan, even that, you know, it's a song about heroin, but it's also, there's also a certain flair about it, you know, that even the backside of the zoo train station can be a point where you kind of belong to, in a way, you know, even it's very hard to understand, you know, but so fame was just great, you know, it was just everything became so cheap, you know, the people bought things for us, you know, we didn't have to buy things, and we had lots of friends, and suddenly we had lots of friends, and we know exactly why that happened. We knew we weren't. We had no illusions about it, and it was just a funny game. And it I mean, it's still it's a funny game. I mean, it's a game. It's a you know, being a musician is such a great thing because you don't have to grow up. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's probably the best explanation for it. You don't have to grow up. You're not forever young, but you don't have to grow up. It's you're an old one day. If you're lucky, you're an old child. One day.
I think what I'm really getting at is that there's also pressures that come onto a band or, you know, a group that success bring, and those pressures can change the dynamic within the band. Did you feel that? And I know that, so maybe explain.
Yeah, it is. We had tensions between the band, but that had nothing to do with fame or with success. But you know, because we were so close to each other, and we were working. We saw each other every day, and we were working together, and we were sharing everything. It was just like it became too much after a while, and then it exploded. When we did the third, I mean, when we did the Breathtaking Blue album, I thought that was probably the end of the band, because there were like scenes happening in the studio that you can't imagine.
Well, I can't imagine, so tell me.
No, it was just like, I mean, we were discussing everything, you know, we were questioning everything, and nobody could really make a decision, you know, and everybody, or somebody wanted to make a decision, then the other one said, no. and why no? No. And it was just like, yeah, it was really tough, you know. There was a moment when I had this argument with Bernard, and Bernard jumped to the machine and wanted to erase all the 24 tracks, you know, for the song that and Rick just jumped behind him and took him in his arm and ripped him from the machine, you know, and things like that. I mean, it was it was like I say, like a problem between husband and wife or something.
It sounds a bit like your army period, to be honest. I hope you didn't wallop any of them. Probably you may have. Anyhow, I'll move on from that. The Forever Young, the album, I want to come up to the present day because I wanted to start with that album and move up to the development of that. And today you've re-recorded the album, but with the German Film Orchestra Babelsberg, or the Deutsches Film Orchestra Babelsberg.
It's not just the album, it's just basically lots of songs from all the other albums as well.
Okay, so but how did that come about? What was the idea behind it? And what does this sort of orchestral development of those songs, what is it achieved with the songs?
Well, I think the most, or that some of the songs for the first time sound like they should have sounded from the very beginning. I mean, they are, when we created them, they were very much influenced by our experience with classical music. And when I heard the orchestra playing, for instance, a song like Classic Come Home, for the first time, I was in tears because I mean, the song has this very long intro that that I wrote. Classic Come Home was the first song that I wrote completely on my own. And when we recorded it for the first time for a second album, I thought there should be also a part for Bernard and a part for Frank. So that is the reason for the length of the intro. You know, the first half of the instrumental stands for Bernard, the second half stands for Frank, and then I start singing. You know, so this was the three of us, you know, in one song. And I had just these melodies on my mind, and we re-recorded those melodies. But when we recorded them with this symphonic orchestra, it suddenly developed, you know, into something that had it was just its character. That was the whole thing. It was for the first time the song felt really complete, and that happened with a lot of other songs as well. So some other songs actually were a little bit more problematic. So, but I had no problem, you know, to change the song so that we could also, that they would also fit in that area of music. And then they became also very, very interesting. Actually, the most interesting songs on the album are those songs that did not fit to this idea of symphonic music, because we had to do something with them, and that there was an additional creative process that made these songs even more interesting than they were in their original form.
Can you tell me about that, what that creative process was, or that collaboration was, and how it worked?
This is very hard. I mean, it's just like, in the most simple way, we had to turn them into a ballad, you know, like Dance With Me, for instance, you know, which is a kind of pretty brainless song in a way. I mean, probably the most brainless lyrics I ever wrote in my life. And we made it as a ballad, and it became unbelievably sad by that. I mean, it's like a blah, 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 blah. It's like a really up-tempo, funny song, you know. And it became so sad. And all these brainless lyrics turned into something very deep suddenly, really. I mean, without, you know, it was never my intention, you know, but suddenly I understood. They told these words, these lyrics told me something that it really came as a surprise. And that was actually the great thing about, you know, that we had to change some of the songs and to make them fit into this area, and that once they were in this area, the environment, you know, changed the meaning, or just brought the meaning out for the first time. I'm very, very much a believer in, or not a believer, but I'm very much into this theory that when we create things, we create also a lot of other things at the same time without knowing it. It's because our brain is such a vast such a big universe, you know, and there's so many connections and so many subconscious things that are going on, and we're not aware of all these things that happen at the very moment when we compose or when we create things. So that everything that has been created has so many other sides, and it's just I think it's that thing that we put the songs into the symphonic shape, just shed a different light on them and made them look completely different, and the meaning also, you know.
Isn't it also that, I mean, I find that really fascinating, because I think that any artist that creates something that touches the audience, because somewhere in both our psyches we connect through the music. And in essence, you're saying that there is another layer to the psyche of the process of creating, which is already there, but you may not know about it as the creator, where the audience may actually hook onto that in any case. So they sort of find it in any case. Do you
Absolutely.
think that's true?
Absolutely. It's just like the audience, I mean, in a concert, and in concert it's different. But when you release something, and people buy the record, it's just like that, as if the music would be reflected by a million different mirrors, you know, of all these people that's buying the record and listening to the record, because every person who buys is a different reflection of the same light, but it's a different reflection. It's just as you just said, you know, just because of that it is like that. And when the great thing about live concert is, a live concert is it's just the channeling into one thing, you know, so that the band and the audience are completely, I mean, if the gig really rocks, you know, then we are all on the same stage. We're all on in the same channel, in the same light, in the same reflection, in the same shadow. It's the opposite thing. That's why I also like to play a concert, to do concerts, and it's also a very prostitutional thing. You know, you want to please the audience. I mean, you really want to do just that, you know. So for instance, when we're rehearsing songs, we're changing them quite a lot because of that. Because we think, oh, no, we cannot play them like we did in the studio, because this is for the listener, you know, to the record or to the CD or streaming. It's okay, but not when you're on stage and perform in front of an audience. And then we think about, well, how could we fucking hell please the audience, you know, with this song? And we become complete prostitute. I mean, it's great. It's a great feeling. It's just suddenly, you are absolutely free of any responsibility. I mean, it's also my deepest belief, you know, that as an artist, you have no responsibility. It's the only place where you have no responsibility, you know. And people come up and say, oh, you cannot do this. This is against ethics or morals. And I say, fuck off, you know. We're not killing anybody with our art, you know. You do that, you know, but not us, not the artist.
But saying it's prostitution is saying that you're giving pleasure over to the audience, but you're not expecting pleasure back. That's what essentially you're saying. But you do gain pleasure from performing with an audience that is very with you, or you're able to pull with you throughout the concert.
Yeah. I mean, you get the pleasure back. I mean, this is even, let's put it like a regular gig, you know. It's just great. I mean, you're standing in front of 100 or a couple of thousand people, and they're all interested in you. They're all coming to look at you, to listen to what you're doing. They have interest in. They probably love you. You know, you get so much back even in a regular concert, which is just in a regular, you know, it's just one of many concerts, you know. But some concerts are really very, very special, and then it's just bam, it's perfect. It's just like a super fuck. I don't know.
Every experience in our life, we take something from, and we're able to use it in some way during the rest of our life. What have you taken from working with this orchestra that you feel now will change your perspective for the future when you create music?
Well, I would like to do this one more time, and when I do it, then I will do it completely different than I just did it, because I learned really a lot about working with an orchestra, and I made many, many mistakes. I had people at my side, you know, arrangers who prevented most of them, you know, but it was as if I would learn, you know, how to use a special tool, you know, and I would really repeat from this experience, repeat it, not in a way that I like do the same thing all over again, but involve orchestra and the possibilities of an orchestra in future Alphaville music. I would be very interested doing so, you know, like the Scott Walker thing, you know, what he did in his mid period, you know, in his very, very interesting arrangements, you know, which, I mean, it sounds like a regular orchestra, but when you listen close, I mean, it's unbelievable what they're doing harmonically and what they're doing. It's just avant-gardistic, you know, absolutely. So you can use the orchestra also in a very pleasant way, and also being very avant-gardistic at the same time, you know, in a pleasant sounding way of being avant-gardistic. You know, that is what Scott Walker is a perfect example for this. I mean, even in his late phase, you could still listen to his music, not only because of his his godlike voice, but also the music. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, it's again, you know, another guy, great guy, we lost in the last 10 years.
Well, Marian Gold, as I started at the beginning, I said, you know, that you have your music has accompanied me for a long period in my life. What I find fascinating about you is that you're very honest, very direct, and you have a wonderful sense of humor that goes with it. And I wish you many, many more years of success in your career and many more years of creativity, because it's clearly that the creativity has been the major impulse in your life that has kept you alive and kept you moving forward. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I hope to see you again one day.
Thank you very much indeed, and it was really a great honor for me to talk to you here. Thank you very much.
Okay, Marian. Thanks very much. I'll see you again. Yeah, bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.